Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ty and Sky's Health Pub. We are very excited, as always, to be speaking to all of you, our beloved listeners. And we came across, like we do normally, you guys are probably like, gosh, how many articles will this guy find? And Tyler's probably sick of me by now, but we did find another article. This one Tyler actually found. So giving him the credit this time, I'm not the only person who's crazy, okay?
Credit where credit is due. Yeah. No, but it is so interesting because there is so much. I mean, every single day there's a plethora of news articles dealing with healthcare issues. So it is kind of fun because it's kind of like seeing what's new today. You know, what's going on in the health world today. So it is fun. And this is actually an article that was released very recently here, late November of 2017. So I guess if you're listening to this in 2022, I hope that we have those mobile virtual reality headsets by that point. Yeah. And
we need more VR headsets.
That's my main hope. Yeah, I need VR and maybe an AR headset where Pokemon is actually something that you are in.
Throw
like it's not Pokemon Go on your phone, and Niantic is not in control of it. The Pokemon Company is, and it's an AR headset that I can go out in the world and interact with pocket monsters.
That's every millennial's dream, huh?
Yeah. I'm pretty basic, I guess.
Well, that's the vision of a great future, and I actually look forward to that. Unfortunately, this article is not a great future, but it's kind of more of a little bit of it's not so much a downer. I guess it's more of we're getting into legal and ethical issues here. Recently, coming out of Minnesota, there was a medical company that terminated over 60 employees over and this is the wording of this is very important, but over refusal to get the flu shot. So to kind of give you guys a little bit of a background, sometimes medical groups will require their workers to get the flu shot, and this situation, and this is kind of what that situation is. And they give a specific date for someone to get a flu shot, and they have to get a flu shot by that date, or else they will be terminated. And so this is actually really interesting because, first, there's so many concerns about this from the get-go, right? Where it's, like, whoa, there's people in healthcare not getting the flu shot, aren't they the ones telling us to get the flu shot all the time? And, Ty, we also got the flu shot recently too. Like, if you guys haven't seen our video,
you can check out a video.
But, we got out there in our suits and we got it done. And,
we got it done. Happy Halloween.
There is the major issue from this article about why people willingly didn't get the shot is that it's all about this issue of conscientious objector, and so.
And what do you mean
kind
by
of that? There is a concern. There's an ethical concern for an individual to do that action. So you might say, for example, in the military, you might not want to use a gun, for example. It's just like a common kind of thing, but you might have any sort of religious or you might have a religious belief that prevents you from doing something. And in this example, the people that were fired, some of them are claiming that as their reasoning.
However, though, we should put out that the company does have the contingency that flu shots are mandatory unless there is a religious or medical exemption. So I guess when you bring that up, that kind of seems to go into a weird area where it may be a he said, she said scenario for like maybe initially it wasn't a religious thing and then they got fired and was like, oh, no, wait, it was a religious. So we can't conjecture on that. But there were employees who were fired who did not have a religious or medical exemption, but just like you mentioned, Skylar, refused to get the flu shot for different reasons.
And the reason I bring it up, I guess, is because it's kind of more of a it's interesting to me because they allow these exceptions, and so it's kind of like in these ideas, but they have to file out forms for it, so they had the time in advance to do this, right? Like they could have preemptively done the form prior to the last date to get the shot. So it's kind of interesting. What we're kind of seeing is that we're seeing claims of it past the date, but it could be for any number of reasons, right? It could be as far as someone didn't know, like despite like even if they were made aware of it, it might have slipped their mind, or there might not have been proper notice given. Like, well, there's no way of telling of knowing for sure. And
there isn't. So maybe it's important to dig into just the idea of refusing to get the flu shot without just in general refusing to get the flu shot, yet working in healthcare with patients. We'll talk specifically about jobs where a person, because I mean it's important to note that there are jobs in a healthcare organization that have no direct patient contact, and I guess that may be something to discuss throughout this as well, because I'm sure those people were required to get the flu shot as well. But speaking specifically of medical providers, so people who will have contact with patients,
nurses, physicians.
So we're talking nurses,
assistants.
Physicians, assistants, physical therapists, surgical techs, other techs, anybody who directly interacts with a patient. It seems to be common sense why we would want to push, other than to practice what you preach, like you mentioned earlier, Skylar, of we tell everybody to get flu shots, so obviously as healthcare providers we should get flu shots and set a good example. But beyond that, it is a safety issue. If you haven't had a chance to check out our patient or our videos that we've done on the flu shot and flu vaccine, you should check those out when you get a chance. We had wonderful discussions on the flu, and I think kind of as a person in the middle of their life, the flu is not something when we approached that talk that seemed all that dangerous to me. Going into that discussion, like before my medical training, before we had that discussion, you feel like, oh, I get the flu, maybe it's a week or so where I feel like crap. But what we've learned, I guess, what I learned throughout medical training and what you and I learned, Skylar, during those podcasts when we were discussing the topics of influenza, is that this can be a deadly disease for people. So it's more than just a week off of work. Or a week where you're feeling kind of crappy but still have to go to work. It can actually cause people to die.
And it does sound like a good idea at first when you're first hearing, like, oh, I get a week off work, right, or something like that. But it not only like you're right about it with workers that are in direct contact with patients, but I kind of wonder about say someone that works in accounts or something. But because of the way the flu spreads, it's so easy to spread that, even those patients, even those workers that are not in direct contact with a if they're not in direct contact with a patient, then they might be in contact with someone who will be. And these are, especially if it's a nurse or something like that, these are people working very long shifts, and generally, like Tyler was saying, there's times where it could be fatal for some people, and there could be people in the hospital that have certain conditions going on where this gets, compounded on top, and it makes things worse. Okay, and so the thing is, there's times where a patient, you're probably wondering, like there's a concern about workers that are not in contact with patients. If they get the flu, though, they might be in contact with a provider that then becomes in contact with the patient. So the way for this flu to spread is through someone who's not directly interacting with the patient, but then it interacts with, say, a nurse, a doctor, anything like that. And this could easily spread to, a patient, and then that could also compound with any other issues that
Yeah.
someone at the hospital might be experiencing.
Yeah,
So it's dangerous.
Yeah, not only is the flu contagious, but when we're talking about specifically a hospital setting, you have people who we say could be in different states of being immunocompromised, which just means their immune system, which typically helps fight off things like influenza, may be at a diminished state, or diminished compared to their normal, or diminished compared to maybe typical normal for most human beings. Based on medical therapy that they may be on, or different diseases that person may have. So these people may find the flu to be a huge problem for their health, a devastating problem. So, like you mentioned, Skylar, even if it's these people who are not working directly with patients, they rub elbows with the people who are, and the flu can just become a major problem and result in illness, and unfortunately maybe even a death that could have been prevented if the vaccine successfully prevented those people who are working in the healthcare field from getting sick in the first place and being able to spread it themselves.
Right. And there definitely is there is some type of in the hospital, there's always, hand sanitizer almost in every single room that you go to. It's cleanliness is important. It really
is. But the flu can spread, like we discussed, through droplets that are coughed out,
right,
and things like that, and it's into the air and it's touching any mucous membrane. So that means if it goes in your nose, mouth, even eyes is one thing we learned. When we were talking about that during that podcast. So it's really difficult you can't control for that simply by washing your hands, right, even though that is a super important thing. And just a quick aside, you should always feel okay to ask your healthcare provider if they've washed their hands, because they should be, before they come in and take care of you. And so that's something that should happen either way. But that may and probably would not prevent the spread of the flu.
Right. It's kind of more of a, I guess I kind of see it as more of a, if a hospital is taking the stance to set up those plans, kind of like preventative means that they're establishing, then it kind of sets up that the hospital actually wants to, it kind of falls through with why they want to have mandated flu shots, because they want to ensure that patient safety. So I do think it's something that, then it really comes down to the crux then is that if we are forcing medical providers to get this, but, probably, a big portion of them would probably willingly get it, but is that really, if we're allowing, religious exemption, in this case, is it, does that compromise that safety, I guess? You know what I mean? Like, does it actually compromise it by allowing, which, if you guys haven't heard about, we've also covered a video in the past before about herd immunity, actually. So, and so definitely learn about that more. But it's kind of like, I don't know. What do you think, Ty? Do you think that actually causes more of an issue, that we allow those exceptions, or do you think that they're warranted? Because to me, I kind of, it's kind of hard to me to separate the difference between someone who refuses, even though their differences might be, the differences in why they don't want it are very different. I don't really understand the difference between why we treat them differently. Like, if someone's being terminated for refusal versus not being terminated because of religious belief.
Yeah. And this is a difficult ethical issue. I think that there is no easy answer. And maybe, I think, however, it's important for us to discuss these issues. I definitely see where you're coming from on that, Skylar, where it seems like it may be kind of weird that here this person's getting fired because they didn't get a flu shot, this person is not getting fired because they have a religious reason, even though both of them didn't get a flu shot, and could still negatively then impact patient care. Either way, it doesn't matter what the reason is. The base fact is that they didn't get the flu shot, and they work in a healthcare organization. I think that it'd be interesting to discuss, because I think the problem of religion, at least currently, I mean, the medical exemption is pretty obvious. If it's gonna cause harm to you,
right,
then obviously you're not gonna get the flu shot. But that's a pretty rare case. The religious reason, like we mentioned, is more difficult, and I think that there are legal reasons currently why that is offered as a reason for an exemption.
Yeah, definitely, because you could claim discrimination off of that alone. Just, you won't let me work here, so because of my religious beliefs. And I've always been, we have to make sure that we walk a fine line, and we treat things fairly. But I don't know in this situation if it's, it's an unfortunate situation for those fired, because, even currently, like, some of them are going through the process of, appeals and, making sure that they can get hired back on. Some of them might even willingly take the flu shot then, but, we don't want it to come into a situation where, like, it's take the flu shot, it's your job, instead of you should want to, because of, you understand the reason why you should get it. I think it's just a lot to consider.
And maybe this would be a perfect question for us to open up to the audience. I mean, you guys should definitely come on over to our Facebook and let us know what you think about this issue. Do you think that religious reasons should be accepted as an exemption to getting a flu shot? Would that be okay for you if you were in the hospital as a sick patient? Maybe you were immune compromised. Would that change your mind? Let's just discuss that. Do you think it's a fireable offense? Basically, do you think that if you work in the healthcare environment, no matter if you're in kind of the offices, not in direct patient contact, or not having direct patient contact, or you are a healthcare provider with direct patient contact, do you think you should be obligated to get the flu shot?
Right, and would it also discourage you from going to a particular provider if you knew that they were excluded from things like this because of those reasons? Or if you knew, like, up front ahead of time, the providers here may be prone to the flu because, a lot of them are not, if there was upfront disclosure of this. Let us know what you think, especially if it's like, should that stuff be an upfront, thing that you can find out? I don't know. I think I'd be a little bit more in favor of knowing more, because I think transparency is important. But I don't know. I'm curious what everyone else would think.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. And beyond that, I think we can draw this to a close with our toast, as always. So let's raise our glasses to knowledge, good and true, to the future health of youth, and the prosperity that they bring. Cheers.
Have a good one.